All right, everyone, we are ready to begin lesson 10.8 over circle equations in the coordinate plane. All right, everyone should have received a copy of this notes page. Please make sure you get that before you try and continue watching this. But otherwise, let's go ahead and talk about what 10.8 is over. We're talking about the equations of circles when you put a circle in the coordinate plane. Now, I'm going to remind you of some vocabulary. You don't have to write this down because it's already printed for you. But a circle is all of the points that are equidistant from one point we call the center of the circle. So if I put the center of the circle as some point on the coordinate plane, it would have an ordered pair. We're going to call that h comma k, where h is the x coordinate, k is the y coordinate of the center of the circle. Okay? And then since all of these points on the circle are equidistant from that center, any x, y is going to have the same distance from HK all around this circle. So really we're basing our formula for the equation of a circle off of our distance formula. And I'll show you how that shows up later on. But this is our equation for a circle in the coordinate plane, where r is the radius and the coordinates h and k are the center. So if I take x and I subtract the x coordinate h from that and square it all, and I add that to y minus this y coordinate k, square that all, that will equal the radius squared. Again, this comes from our distance formula, which could also be found using Pythagorean theorem. But this is our equation. Now, if it has x minus 2, you'll need to know that h is actually positive 2. If it's y minus some other number 3, k would be positive 3. So the minus tells you to take the opposite of the coordinate. Okay, so we've got some different methods for identifying center and radius from an equation, all right? So this is our most basic circle equation, and if it just has x squared and it doesn't have x minus h squared, that's because h would have to be 0 in this case. And same thing for y squared. If there is no y minus k, it's just y squared, that's because k would have to equal 0. Okay, so if it just has x squared plus y squared, that lets you know that h and k are at 0 and 0. That makes the center the origin. 0, 0. Okay, so if I have an equation x squared plus y squared equals 9, 9 is 3 squared, so your radius has to be 3. If I have x squared plus y squared equals 36, 36 is 6 squared, so that's why I know my radius is 6. So, if this is the equation I have, x squared plus y squared equals 49. X squared tells me that h was 0. Y squared tells me that k was 0, because I'm not subtracting or adding anything to that. And 49, what do you square to get 49? That'd be a 7. 7 squared is 49, so the radius is 7. Okay? So the radius squared equals 49, so I take the square root of each of these to get the radius. That's another way you can think of it. The square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 49 is 7. Okay? So we've got some other examples. Now this is a case where we actually have different coordinates for the center of your circle. So if it's x minus 2 squared and y minus 1 squared equals 100, the center is 2, 1. Again, we take the opposite of whatever this looks like. The minuses change into positives when you mark the center, because you're saying the distance between x and 2, so we subtract. And the distance between y and 1, so we subtract there. So the center is 2, 1. The radius has to be 10, because that's the square root of 100. You take the square root of this number to get just r. Here, if it's x plus 3, that's the same as x minus negative 3. So the x coordinate for the center is negative 3. And then y minus 5 makes the y coordinate for the center positive 5. 16 is r squared, so the square root of 16 is 4. That's how your radius is 4. So I want you guys to try and do this. If I've got x squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 81, I want you to identify the center and the radius. Alright, you should be able to see that if it's just x squared, the center x coordinate is 0. But if it's y plus 2, remember that's really y minus negative 2. So the center's y-coordinate is negative 2. And for this, that's r squared. So we take the square root of 81 and we get 9. So the radius is 9. So the center is at 0, negative 2. The radius is at 9. The whole reason that we do this now is so that we can take an equation like this and graph the circle in the coordinate plane. So what I would like us to do for these two graphs is first identify the center and the radius, and then I'll show you how to put that onto a graph. We can't use a straight edge because we're graphing circles, and so we have to use our best representation to try and draw as close to a circle as we can get. Okay, so remember, x minus h is what should go here, h being the x-coordinate of your center point. Okay, well, if I just have x squared, h has to be 0, because that would be x minus 0 squared. And the same thing for y. Y minus 0 squared is how I get just y squared. So the center is at the origin, 0, 0. So go ahead and mark that point on your graph. And then if r squared equals 9, the radius is the square root of 9, which is 3. So the radius is 3. Now, that is going to tell me how to find 4 other points on my circle. So if this is my center, the radius would go to the right 3 from the center. It would also go up 3 from the center. It would go to the left 3 from the center. And it would go down 3 from the center. So I have 4 points I can use to draw a circle. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. All you have to do is try and draw a circular path, and I would suggest breaking it up into these 4 quadrants, these 4 parts. It may not look perfect at first. Mine definitely won't. See, I'm cutting it a little close. There we go. It's a little better. Okay, it definitely should not look like a diamond. We should have a little more curve to it, and you can kind of draw your lines sketchy a little bit like this. But that's our circle, where the radius is 3, because that's a square root of 9, and the center is at 0, 0. Okay, let's try this one. You can, or should be able to tell, that your center will not be at the origin because I have 2 other values here. Remember, the center has the coordinates hk, where h is what we have here. X minus h means that h is 2. And y plus 1 is really y minus negative 1. So negative 1 is k. So my center of my circle is at 2, negative 1. We should start by plotting that point. X coordinate of 2, y coordinate of negative 1. There's the center of your circle. Now, we need to find the radius. Well, the radius squared, r squared, is 4, so the radius is the square root of 4, which is 2. That means from that point I can go up 2. From that center I can go to the right 2. From that center I can go down 2. And from that center I can go left 2. So there are the 4 points on your circle, and again, just try and fill in the 4 parts of your graph to get your circle. Now, the more you do this, the better your circles will look. I'm not going to count off if they're a little bit odd. Now, don't copy this part down, but if your circle looks like a diamond, you didn't really put much effort in. Now, I'm not going to count that. If your circle looks like a clover, I'm not going to count that because, again, you're putting not enough effort in. You're just being kind of sloppy. As long as it's pretty close to what a circle looks like. Then I'm going to count it right. Okay? Now, that was our method 1. If we're given an equation, we can identify the center and radius and then graph it. Let's turn the page. Okay? Method 2 is a little bit different. In this case, we're given the center and radius, we can write an equation. And so I've kind of stepped this out how to do that. Here is the given information. Okay, we are given the center and then a radius. We are always going to start by writing the equation of our circle, x minus h all squared plus y minus k all squared equals r squared, and then we just plug in the information. Okay, h is this first part or first coordinate from your center. K is the second coordinate from your center. Okay, so we do x minus 3 all squared plus y minus negative 3 all squared. And then r is your radius, so I do radius squared, or 6 squared, which when we simplify this would give us this equation. X minus 3 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 36. Okay, so let's try some of these examples. Here we're told the center is at the origin. So I want you to remember what the ordered pair is for the origin. That should be 0, 0. And the radius is 3. So when we start, I want you to write out x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And then we need to plug in the things that we know. Instead of h, we're going to put in 0. Well, if I have x minus 0, that's just x. So that whole first part becomes x squared. Same thing for y minus k. Y minus 0 is just y. So we have plus y squared equals 3 squared equals 9. So instead of writing it as 3 squared, we write it as 9. So that is a circle with a radius of 3 centered at the origin. Let's try one more when we don't have the center at the origin. Okay? Center's at 4, negative 1. That means that's h, that's k. So we need to start by writing our general form. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And then we fill in what we know. H is 4, so that becomes x minus 4 squared. K is negative 1, so it becomes y minus negative 1 squared. And our radius is 5 squared. Now let's simplify that. This first part doesn't change. X minus 4 squared. Plus, this part can be simplified. Remember that minus a negative always changes to plus. And 5 squared is 25. So that's how we write our equation of that circle. Okay, I want you to take some time, and we'll have whoever's running the computer here pause the video. I want you to try and do this example on your own, and then check your answer. So pause the video, give about 2-3 minutes to try and work that out and get an answer in simplified form, and then when you're ready to continue, push play. Okay, we should get x minus 1 squared plus y plus 8 squared equals 49. All right, in this last example here, for this part, we're given the graph instead of written information that way. So we need to be able to do a couple things. For one, we need to be able to find the coordinates of the center. Okay, this center is at an x coordinate of 1 and a y coordinate of 3. Okay, and we need to be able to tell them what the radius is. Now, the radius goes from 1 out to 3, so that's a radius of 2 on the x direction. So all we have to do is plug that in. X minus 1 squared plus parentheses y minus 3 squared equals r squared. If r is 2, r squared is 4. Okay? All right, and that leads us to this last part. We're going to go through this kind of quickly because the video is running a little bit long. Step 1 is to find the distance between the 2 points to figure out your radius. Okay, so we use our distance formula for that. Sometimes you can just count. And step 2 is to write the equation using the center. One of these points is the center, and the radius you found is that. Okay, I want you to pause the video and try and follow these instructions to do examples 1 and 2, and when you're ready to continue, you can push play and see what you get for these answers. Alright, these are the answers you should get. When you do the distance formula for these two, you get a radius of 5. So that's your equation for the first one. And then for the next one, you get a radius of 4, so that's your equation.